You are listening to On The Wire, Racing TV's Irish racing podcast.
Well, hello. On The Wire is back. It's that time of year again. Dublin Racing Festival, arguably pound for pound the best racing festival, bar none. And I'm including Cheltenham in that, considering all the fluff that Cheltenham entails over 4 days. Now, in the Dublin Racing Festival, you compress the whole lot into 2 days. Loads of the Brits come over, have a great time, go out to Dublin afterwards, and get to meet Brendan Duke. And Brendan Duke is one of quartet on today's podcast. And we're also joined by, what are they called? The Let's Talk Racing duo, and it is the great Andrew Blair White and Joshua Stacey, adding a bit of colour, youth, and general exuberance to today's podcast. But let's start with something other than that. Dukey, how are you?
Well, I don't think I could be any better, actually, Johnny. I'm back to winner today. Go for a few points tonight. I'd like to go for a few points on a Thursday because I don't kill myself on a Friday. The boy James Lincoln is over, so I'm meeting him for a drink tomorrow night as well. And it's a bank holiday weekend, so it all adds up to a pretty sweet deal.
And you got the Dublin Race Festival in the middle. What does this festival mean to you?
Well, it means I can go and see some top-class horses, and I can get there in about 25 minutes. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but if we've learned anything from Christa Berg and Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's that proximity counts. So I love the lap, yeah.
I've never heard that before, but it's interesting analysis nonetheless. Andrew Blair White, I got to get you on the narrative of the 2 days. This is the main narrative. It's the dominance of Willie Mullins. It's some of particularly the graded race where you're talking about 3/4 of the field in the juvenile hurdle. As a particular example, lots of British raiders coming over to watch the racing this week. They're going to avail of some hospitality in Dublin and some top class racing. How do you find that part of the narrative and Willie's general domination, not only of Cheltenham entries, but here as well?
Yeah, I suppose it's the one thing that you might look at as being a bit of a downside to these grade ones. But at the same stage, he's got an awful lot of different owners running in these races. It's good that he's running them against each other. If we didn't have his horses in the Irish Arkle in the juvenile race, it wouldn't look a whole pile of good. So it does add to it. I must say, you look at like the horse we've all been caught, say, in the first race on the first day for Nigel Twiston Davis, and you have to applaud it. I remember Warren Greatrix's mare winning at the Novice Chase a few years ago, Labago Wa, and she got almost a hero's reaction from the local crowd. I think there's this little bit of fluff, really, that the English think that the Irish fans don't want to see these horses over, when they clearly do, and they give them a hero's welcome. So I wish them well with that horse. I think Topville Ben's running in the handicap chase on the second day, but overall you would like to see maybe a couple more English entries in the next few years.
Not only that, Josh, we want to see English lads and lassies over as well. Are you coming over? What does the Dublin Race Festival mean to you?
It means a lot. I've actually been to every renewal except from this year. It's just an unbelievable weekend of racing and very informative, pointing towards the Cheltenham Festival. I often go with Andrew, but this year he's ditching me. I'm working and he's going over. So unfortunately won't be there, but you can't not look forward to it. It's, in my opinion, the best weekend of National Hunt racing all season. I just think it's that good.
Yeah, and just to extrapolate on what Andrew was saying there, Willie Mullins may be running a scatter of horses in the race, but they do have different owners. And with Willie Mullins, you can essentially bank that the horses are trying. And with all due respect, that actually does matter in the sense that I don't mind backing a Willie Mullins second string or third string at any stage in any race. And they are different owners. It may be one stable dominated, but there are different jockeys, and their bookmakers are going to take each other on in terms of weighing up each horse. So, let's look at the positive, and there are lots to be positive about in terms of this show. And we will also hear from Jane Mangan later on. She's going to look at the Irish Champion Hurdle, taking a completely different view to me, and more of that and on. But we go through the graded races and the handicaps as well, and check out Racing TV for all of the live race over the weekend, and a few tips from yours truly and others as well. Let's start, Juki, with the first race. This is the Nathaniel Lacey and Partners solicitors. This is the novice hurdle for stayers, 2 miles 6. For me, we've a somewhat vulnerable favourite here in the shape of Good Land. What do you make of
it? Yeah, I mean, they all have their vulnerabilities to a degree. I thought it was a tricky race. I was very disappointed with Grange Clare West and Nace. I backed him. He's surely better than that. He's such a good-looking horse. Maybe I'm overdoing that, but he was quite weak at the off, although he was in Navan the previous time as well. I'd be inclined to give Grange Clare West another chance. I think he's better than he was in Nace. And that Deep Cave, I was quite impressed with him in Leopardstown. I rate that lot of joy. I think she's been unlucky. She's run into a couple of good horses, but he has a lot to do on collateral form. For all he should improve for the step up and trip. So yeah, just a small bet on Grange Clare West. And for anyone who is going, they should definitely get an eye full of him in the parade ring. Magnificent specimen.
This is what I love about this type of race, Josh. Deep Cave, as mentioned by Duty, proper winner at Leopardstown the last year. You can back him at 20-1 in this race. That's how deep it is. And I was going to put up Croix de Paris as a sort of a value alternative, thinking Townend would ride him, or would not ride him rather, and would ride Duty's horse Grange Clare West. But he's actually switched to the Tremor winner. You could talk about this race all day and still not find the winner.
Oh, big time. And the thing about Grange Clare West, I think he's similar to American Mike. Clearly bundles of ability there, and we've seen it at stages, but the last run especially wasn't particularly good. They both got something to prove for me. I think Goodland probably brings the best form into the race with regards to maiden hurdles, but the way that Willie Mullins was talking about Cader Parry of the season, and he kept mentioning him and as one to follow, he went to Tremor. He probably wasn't particularly impressive visually, but I think he could come on a lot for that, especially up in trip. And I agree. I thought yesterday he was 11-1. He's been backed in today, obviously, with the booking of Paul Townend. I think that he is a look. No, didn't look great. What didn't look great, but Willie's very often, not very often. Sorry, he's not often wrong with regards to horses he really fancies, and he really liked Cader Parry.
ABW, he's by the sire of Tiopu, obviously Ledger winner as well. Stamina looks to me like it's going to improve.
Yeah, certainly. And look, he'll come forward for that Tremor run, as Josh said. Now, I must say, he's gone into 9-2 in a few books. And I must say, I had the completely different opinion. I thought that was a really, really average price for what he did. He fell in Tremor. I think there's better horses in this lineup. And if it wasn't for the fact that Townend's on him, I don't think he'd be even half the price. So, look, on my personal affection is towards both Goodland and Xander Clegane. I thought Xander Clegane is the improver in this lineup. Paul Nolan can't get enough of this horse going up in trip. And it's interesting, Paul had a pretty hard start to the season. I think he only had one winner before Christmas time, and he's had 5 winners in the last 4 or 5 weeks, all pretty decent. You think a HMSC horse, the horse that won the bumper, cut the rope. You know, he's got a few decent enough tools there, and I think this is probably the best in his yard. He's been very effusive that this is a good Albert Bartlett chance, and if that's the case, I think he'll go very close in this. And given Latest Exhibition won this race a few years ago, it would be some nice needed irony for Paul Nolan, who's had a few difficult years with losing a few good horses.
Of course, that is the beauty of On the Wire since the outset. If we put enough people on the show, they'll have so many different opinions that essentially one of us has to be right, and we'll probably still be wrong in the opening race. But we will be right, I think, ABW, in this juvenile hurdle. Last out for me, one of the bankers at Cheltenham.
Yeah, I think so. I think she wins this and wins it easy. Look, this gal Arceau ran a perfectly nice race behind her at Christmas time. She might be getting the Illet Dump treatment this year that just runs in grade ones and comes up short against the likes of Lossiemouth and Blood Destiny. I'd have backed Lossiemouth against Blood Destiny on the weekend if they were running against each other. Obviously, him not running makes the task even easier. And I'd have thought she'd take this en route to being a very, very short price favourite at Cheltenham.
Dukey, you may not be busy on a Friday, but one time you actually worked for a bookmaker, and I think you'll attest to the fact that bookmakers will be taking lots of accums this weekend at the DRF, and she's going to be in them.
Yes, looks bomb-proof. I mean, she beat the second fav out the gate the last day. No reason why she wouldn't confirm the form. She's an impressive mare. She's an impressive mare physically, actually. She's a lot of substance about her, and she doesn't look out of place amongst the geldings. And like Andrew, when I saw the entries, I thought Blood Destiny could give her a race, but there's nothing in here to worry about.
You mentioned Gust of Wind, actually, Josh, also by the same stallion as the favourite, and one of these many horses that Willie's bringing over for juvenile hurdles from France.
Yeah, I don't think he'll particularly mind if he's beaten. I think it's eye-catching that he's entered him in a Grade 1, and he's done it quite a few times in recent years. Andrew mentioned Illet Tomp. I remember he ran night and day in the Grade 1 Mares Novice Hurdle at Fairyhouse last year. She was probably a year too soon, first time up. But if they get beat, they're novices for the following year. If they win, then you've won a Grade 1. So no harm in being beaten. I think Lossie Mass very good, and I think she'll probably win.
Sticking with you, Josh, the Goffs Irish Arkle. I mean, 5 Willie Mullins runners, but I love the shape of this race. I mean, you can literally make a case for pretty much any of these horses, either winner each way. I think if you're looking at the betting, it's on Raw for me. Is a little bit overpriced at around about 12 to 1. But you probably have an alternative view.
I didn't expect all of them to turn up. We looked at this race on Let's Talk Racing, and I probably said there might be 4, maybe 5. I thought there would be Dysart Dynamo, Fabiola. I thought Banbridge would run, Saint Marois, Visionary, and I certainly didn't expect to appreciate it. Flame Bear and Phil Dor are a bonus. I think Phil Dor would be seen to better effect up in trip, but now Appreciate It runs. I think he is the class act. What's going to be frightening is Appreciate It, El Fabiola, and Dysart Dynamo all look like they need to go forward. They were all very free.
That's not frightening at all. That's absolutely exhilarating, my man.
It's exhilarating, but does that set up for a Saint Marois who you imagine will be ridden more patiently? I think Appreciate It is the best of the top 3 in the market, and I think he will take the beating. I think the market have found him. Equally, you just don't know. Dysart Dynamo looked an absolute nutter. Reminds me a bit of Underso. El Fabiola looked good. He's got close form ties with John Bon. It's going to be a cracker, and one thing's for certain: we will know Willie Mullins is our cohort after this.
Juki.
Well, it's interesting that Josh says that. So Dysart Dynamo, of course, famously announced himself winning a bumper in Punchestown, and it was scarcely believable. I mean, he pulled the jockey's arms out the whole way around. So you knew he had a big engine, but would he ever be able to harness his talents? But I thought over Christmas, what was remarkable about him was he jumped really well. Now, you have to be careful with that, of course. He got a complete solo, but he settled really well. So I don't know whether it's the fences or he's just got a bit older. They've done a bit of work on him at home. But I thought he looked a different horse in terms of how he relaxed in the race. And if he continues that kind of progression, he jumped really well. Again, his jumping's going to be under a lot more pressure here. And I'm a devil for falling for these horses getting a solo out in front, thinking, oh, he's a wicked jumper. Then they fall asunder when they're put under pressure. But I mean, now that Paul is riding Appreciated, it's certain to go off Fav. But looking at these before the jockey bookings, I wouldn't have had anything in the betting between Dysart Dynamo and Appreciated. And at the prices, I'll definitely be back in Dysart Dynamo.
Andrew.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Willie Mullins is slightly doing me in here because I've had a decent bet on Appreciated for the Turners. I thought he was all over, going to go up in trip. I think there's still potentially
not necessarily. No, I mean he was probably going to run him in this race anyway, and that could still happen in my view.
Yeah, potentially, but unfortunately, I think he's the best horse in this race. So if he goes and wins this, there's no way he's going up to the Turners. So there's a part of me that almost would like Dysart Dynamo to beat him a length. Appreciated stays on, and Dysart Dynamo can be the Arkle horse, and Appreciated can go up. It's a hard one to know. It wouldn't be a strong betting race for me. The horse that I think is completely overpriced and overlooked is Flame Bearer. You have to remember for Pat Doyle last year, he got better the more and more runs he had. And as much as he blotted his copybook at Naas on Chase debut, he was good the last day. Again, another one of these solos. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we come back to this at the end of May and we've had all of the graded festivals and he hasn't picked up a grade 1. I think he's a really good horse, and given the right tactics, given the right conditions, he could go very well at a price of 20-25 to 1+.
Yeah, he's again one of these really talented horses, bit like you find throughout the 2 days that it's just a big price because of the quality of the action. No big price for Gallopin Des Champs, Yuki. I guess if you're sort of doubling him with Lossy Mouth, what are you looking for? Something like 4 to 5, something like that. He is going to take very high rank, obviously, in the big race of the day. Not entirely sure about him at Cheltenham for the Gold Cup, but I can't see him win here.
Yeah, the race has its fascinations with maybe the Gold Cup in mind. Though I've had one anti-post bet for Cheltenham, not a big bet granted, but I backed Statler for the Gold Cup. Because for all that you have the likes of Plutar and Sizing John who do stretch out from shorter trips, it's such a vicious stamina test that I prefer the likes of a Native River or Manila Indo, Dower Stairs, and Statler is certainly that. I'm not sure what happened in Tremor. He didn't jump great. Now, interestingly, last season his jumping just got better every run. He was a bit sticky early on, and then he put in an exceptional round of jumping when he won at the Cheltenham Festival last year. So I'm just going to put it down to Tremore's an idiosyncratic track. Cheltenham is as well, to be fair, but I'm just going to put it down to the Tremore factor, and he wasn't given the greatest ride in the world. So I assume with Kenboy in this race, it's going to be run at a decent pace. And I could see Statler coming back at galloping towards the end and getting relatively close. I mean, part of me that hasn't had an anti-post bet in the Cheltenham Gold Cup wants Galloping to just absolutely burst through the line here and beat them 6 or 7 lengths, because he's such an exciting horse, a brilliant jumper. And if he does stay at Cheltenham, he just wins. But 3 mile, 2.5 furlongs, I mean, it's one of the toughest stamina tests in the game. And for a horse with so much speed, he'll probably be all right tomorrow, on Saturday, should I say, but I worry about him at Cheltenham.
Would tend to somewhat agree, Josh, but I really don't see any of these getting anywhere near him, including Statler.
No. And I think if you could design a campaign for a horse like Galopin Des Champs, you start him over 2.5 miles. He showed attitude that I didn't think he had that day. He settled very early on, almost looked a bit too relaxed, and went through his race really well, picked up. And then you move on to 3 miles at Leopardstown, a track he knows well, a track that I think suits him down to the ground. And then you go up to the Gold Cup. Just think he takes this in his stride, and all roads lead to Cheltenham.
Yeah, we'll shortly talk about any other business on the day, but AOB from ABW here. What do we like in terms of this? Is there a bet, Andrew?
I don't think so. This is one to hopefully watch, and you're just hoping that he puts in a performance similar enough to the John Durkin, and he wins by 7-8 lengths, as Dukey was saying, and fingers crossed you've got a really proper tool on your hands.
Mark Wallace Dukey returns first ride since 29th of December. He rides Get My Drift in the Paddy Park Cheltenham Fan Zone Handicap Chase 410. I'd be all over him. Anthony, you liking the rest of the card?
Not particularly. I thought the handicaps were very difficult. I mean, despite the rise he got, he's been so impressive in his last 2 runs. You can't rule out another win for Maxim, but
sorry, just on that, I did a bit of counting earlier, and I could still have been wrong. Maxim and stablemate Jungle Pros, since they joined Gordon, have improved on aggregate £91, right? And both were beaten first time out.
Yeah. It's a tough school for anyone who backed them in those races. And Jungle Pros was absolutely hammered. Was it in Tremor or Goran? Maybe she put in an awful performance. Yeah. But anyway, I think I'll just watch the handicaps, which is very disappointing. I'd probably have a few quid on Facile Mode. I see he's 3-1. I mean, it's very difficult with these bumpers trying to get all the form together, and there could be some very talented horses in here. But he did win a winner's bumper. They were hardly all useless in behind. And the surge he put in, you wouldn't know, Johnny, of course, because you get a lift and you get the good parking. But for those of us who get the bus to Leopardstown and have to walk up from the gates, it's a vicious climb up there. It's sneaky stiff, Leopardstown, sneaky stiff. And he just burst, came around the turn and flew up the hill. I was really impressed, and there was a few quid from him as well. He went off 16-1, but I think he was 50s earlier, so it wasn't a complete shock to connections. I probably have a few quid in him, but nothing hectic.
Yeah, he's not the only facile with a lot of class by Walk in the Park, obviously running this week, which will be part 2 of the show. With you, actually, Andrew, anything else on day one?
Yeah, well, in the bumper itself, I've had a right go on this fact to file for Willie Mullins midweek. Just have a feeling I like Willie Mullins horses that have won 2.5 mile bumpers. I think it's not a bad angle. I know he took a long time to get past the Eddie O'Grady horse, but I'd say he's very good, that Irish Panther. Will Do's a pretty decent stick back in third, and I think he'll sharpen up for that. Obviously, Patrick's now booked to ride him, so he has shortened up in price. He's maybe not the greatest price at 7-2 now. And the one I would say to certainly have a couple of quid on each way in the 3 mile handicap hurdle is Gatsby Gray. He's 50-1 for Oliver McKiernan and Phil Enright. He showed some really sharp novice form last year, going up to 3 miles for the first time. I think he'll be ridden out the back, but I'd be very surprised if he doesn't fill the frame.
Yeah, Oliver McKiernan's horse is flying at the moment. Anything else from you, Josh, day one?
I like one in the 2 mile handicap hurdle, and it is a horse that's probably just slightly overpriced in my opinion. I think Battle Over Doyen has one of these big handicaps in him. Just over a year ago, he finished second in a Grade 1 behind Overland at Christmas. And I think this time, I think in April, he was rated 155 running a handicaps. He's now climbed down to 142. He's got Corey McGivern claiming 7, so effectively running off 135. And I just don't think the form's been too terrible this season. He has been on the decline, but he finished a 2 3/4 length third behind Easy Game and Kenboy at Goran in the PWC Champion Chase in October. I thought that was a very good run. He dropped since then, dropped £7 since then. And with the young lad claiming, I think that he could be overpriced at 33 to 1.
Yeah, Corey's a couple of nice rides, and Keen Quirk as well riding Maxim. So Gordon is definitely taking advantage of these lads with their claims. On to day 2, I'll start with you, Andrew, on the Ladbrokes Novice Chase. I don't really have a strong view on this because we are recording this on Thursday, so we're a little bit of a prisoner to declarations. And this 2 mile 5 contest, in which I think it's fair to say, regardless, Mighty Potter is going to go off favourite.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the first 3 or 4 in the betting probably are going to run in this. Mighty Potter is probably the right price now. He was 9 to 4 a day or 2 ago, which I could have advertised being a very good bet. He's probably short enough that I can leave him be. I think he's the best form in the race. I don't see how Gallard de Menil, if he does run, reverses the Drinmore form. And I must say, this James de Burley is a talking man's horse, and I'd like to see him do it in a Grade 1 before actually believing it myself. Another horse got solo in kind of a chase debut where nothing wanted to get near him, and if it wasn't for a few flashy entries and declarations from Willie Mullins a few years ago running him in the Champion Hurdle, like everyone keeps coming back to the fact he ran him in a Champion Hurdle first time out, he got mapped in that race. So I just think it's one of those I'd prefer to leave him be, and I think Mighty Potter is the likely winner.
The beauty of me there is I was actually lost thinking of Honeysuckle and State Man, and just that a race can actually stop a nation almost of a day, and it might be that. We're nearly getting there, and we will hear from Jerry Mangan. But Josh, anything on this Novice Chase?
Nothing really. I was hoping Jerry Cologne would run here, but he's going to Sandown for the Scilly Isles. I think Mighty Potter will just confirm the form of Gallard de Menil. And James de Burley is a tricky one. I do think he's got an awfully big engine. He's just extremely fragile. I'd like to see him back last performance up.
The Dukeser?
Not a whole pile to add. I really like Mighty Potter. He hasn't been foot perfect at all in either of his chase starts, so that is a concern when you're taking a short price. But he's all heart, this horse. He basically did nothing wrong in his novice hurdles. He couldn't cope with the Super Freak and the Supreme, but we give him a pass for that. And I thought he'd win, but I'd almost certainly just watch the race.
So I think if we're on to the Ladbrokes Dublin Chase now, I think we're still on Willie Mullins odds on shots here. We're just edging into odds against if you're running on to Blue Lord here, Dukey, who is a horse that's actually an amazing record over fences. For all that, I wasn't a big fan of him, and I've completely flipped at this stage. The one thing here that interests me is how he'll be ridden.
Okay, I would guess that they will hold him up. It seems to be working. He looks a stronger model this year. I must ask you actually, because in fairness, I should give you some props here. On you did tell me to back him at a very big price for the Champion Chase. I didn't do it, but have you taken the big prices for the Champion Chase?
I'm on a 33Z tray. I even told a taxi driver to back it, and then he told me that his daughter was a famous Irish actress. So I ended up sending her a message on Instagram saying, I hope your dad backed the horse. And she didn't say whether or not he had or whether or not she had. But anyway, he's 33s in the trees now.
Yes, well, I'm delighted to hear that, because I half thought you wouldn't back it. I remember I went for dinner with my cousin once, and this is the very embryonic stages of it. And he told me you could do worse than throw 50 quid into Bitcoin. And I didn't pay any attention to it or what have you. And then Bitcoin absolutely took off. But I asked him then, I met him a couple of years later, and asked him, did you buy any Bitcoin? No. So, I mean, it's not such a sick game if you get a tip. But if you give the tip and you don't back it. So I'm delighted with your anti-post wager. I think Blue Lord will win here. Obviously, he's 1 to 4. He definitely looks a stronger model to me. He's relaxing better in his races, and you should have a very exciting ticket come March.
This all came about, Andrew, because I laid him at Clonmel thinking the trip was wrong. I was kind of half right, but I was actually, my breath was taken away with how good he looked that day physically and the way he jumped.
Yeah, no, he seems a better horse, a much better horse this year. The way he put that performance together at Leopardstown, I know you could argue the race maybe fell apart a little bit. Chacun Pour Soi maybe not. I didn't think he ever had that type of performance in to win an open grade one in that sort of fashion. Look, he's not even facing anything of use here. Even the old stagers like Captain Guinness, obviously Castle Grace Paddy's retired recently. You know, the old stagers that used to turn up in these races, they're not even there anymore. So it looks a complete penalty kick. And you know, if you've backed him for Cheltenham, you're just hoping he stays in one piece and gets round.
Who goes off favourite at Cheltenham, Josh?
I think Edwardstone goes off home. I think Edwardstone's going to win. I do.
Edwardstone has absolutely no chance of winning at Cheltenham. What are you talking about?
Which, come on, there. Of course he has a chance.
So
He couldn't even win the last day. He literally thrown his way and he still couldn't win.
Who's going to beat him?
Blue Lord.
Why did that win knuckle last year?
I think he's a better horse, but it is the concern is he did slam him 12 months ago.
I don't know. I think he'll win at the weekend. I still think he's going to find Edwardstone too good. I expect Edwardstone to come on leaps and bounds at the weekend. After his fall at Kempton at Christmas, I think they were potentially going for a confidence building run. I think they'd have been happy if you'd given Alan King second before the race, and the fact that he had every chance to win it. I think fitness just left a little bit on him and saved him for Cheltenham. I think he'll come on leaps and bounds.
It's great to have opinions and differing opinions, and I think that will be the case here ahead of. This is the race I think that definitely everyone wants to watch this weekend if you can pick one race. Channel Pharma Irish Champion Hurdle. Let's hear what Jane Mangan thinks. She's wrong, by the way.
The Chanel Farmer Irish Champion Hurdle. Honeysuckle, I think everybody, bar obviously Gordon Elliott and connections, were a little bit sad to see Honeysuckle's unbeaten run come to an end. I know all good things do come to an end. That was in the Hatton's Grace. I thought she was booked for success until just getting it under the last, and
she got outstayed. She
got outstayed by two top-class horses, and probably what was the strongest? Two stairs in the strongest renewal of a Hatton's Grace. Look
over 2.5 miles on soft ground.
He's now favoured for the World Hurdle.
Yes.
He bolted up in the Galmay Hurdle, of course, last week at Gorham Park, and Classical Dream. He's no slouch, back in second that day.
Yeah, and she, for me, has always brought her best performances to Leopardstown. She's a dual champion hurdle winner. She's heading for her fourth. She's attempting her fourth Irish champion hurdle. She's been the star of the last couple of years. Constitution Hill is the new guy on the block, but he's not here. Epatante isn't here. I'm so surprised we haven't got a British contender here. All the same, it's Willie Mullins versus the mare. Vauban and Stateman. Stateman's Morgiana win. He won last time at Christmas. Vauban had his first reappearance since the Triumph, and he ran very promisingly.
He ran a cracker. He's going to come on a lot from it now.
He's going to have to.
Yes.
He's heading from the frying pan into the fire, shall we say. The mare is there to be shot at. Connections are basically every day could be her last run. If she's not up to scratch, this could be her last run. So I would implore anybody who's a fan of racing, a fan of her, that if you have the opportunity to go racing on Sunday, just don't miss it, because you might regret it.
Can you see her doing it again?
I can. I honestly think she got outstayed.
Yeah.
She got involved as she typically does at Fairy House, turning in. There's 3 furlongs to run, 2 hurdles to jump. And the last couple of years, she's kind of scrambled home. Just got home ahead of Ronald Pump 2 years in a row. Yes, but he's a stayer.
Yeah.
And Classical Dream, stayer, beat Flooring Porter, Leopardstown over 3 miles last year. I know he's a Supreme Novices winner, but more recently he's a stayer. And of course, Tia Hoopo, as you mentioned, now stairs hurdle favourite. So I think she got outstayed on soft ground over 2.5 miles. This is more her bag. It's been dry, 2 miles, and I do believe that she brings her best to Leopardstown. So I'm still on the side of the mare. Is that my heart ruling my head? Possibly, but I don't think Stateman is Constitution Hill. And I don't think Vauban is yet either. So I don't see her beating Constitution Hill at this stage, but I could see her putting up a bold show to defend her crown.
Josh, I just cannot have Honeysuckle here at all. Simple as, I cannot have Honeysuckle here. I think she's an amazing mare. I think everyone loves her, and the emotion that this would entail were she to win would render any bet on the race on anything else completely obsolete. All of the above, blah blah blah, and the reaction that will it'll be right up there with Faugheen winning. I think the Novice Chase. She cannot win, can she?
I disagree. I think she can. I really do think she can. She's won this race the last 3 years. She's a dual champion hurdle winner. She didn't need to prove anything. I think immediately after the Hatton's Grace, you might have thought, oh, what happened there? Maybe she didn't stay. I agree with Jane on that point. And Tiupu's come out, franked that form. And I think for me, it's the weight swing. Stateman's a very good horse, but he's been beating the same horses that Honeysuckle's been beating the last few years. And I don't think he's been doing it any more impressively than Honeysuckle has. He's got to give Honeysuckle £7. She's been here before. I think she's a very good horse around Leopardstown, and I struggle to think that he can do that.
I love to hear that. I totally disagree, Andrew, but you can see, Josh makes a fair case here. I would be surprised if she finishes in the first two.
Yeah, look, I can see her running a big race. Obviously, I don't buy the non-staying argument in the slightest, to be honest. I still think her personal career best performance was beating Benny the Jew off level weights in the mare's hurdle. She stayed every bit of 2.5 that day against Benny, who was probably a 2.5 to 3 mile mare. And look, she's kind of been very good at 2 miles, with always looking like she maybe needed a little further. I just think at the end of the day, the horse I can't have in this is Vauban, personally. I don't see how he reverses the form with Stateman from Christmas time. My overriding feeling is that Stateman is absolutely mustard. And if Constitution Hill wasn't around, we'd all be up off our seats thinking this horse is absolutely quality. And I don't personally believe Honeysuckle has faced any horse as good as Stateman in the 2 mile division in the last 3 years.
Couldn't agree more with you. Dukey.
Yeah, I think that basically sums it up. It's a fair point to say that her career best came in the mare's hurdle, because, I mean, this mare just has exquisite timing. I mean, she's basically beaten up by champion hurdle standards, very ordinary horses in the champion hurdle. She's won 2 of them. Can't take anything away from her, of course, but the division does seem to have roared back to life this season. And I think she'll be exposed on Saturday as pretty limited.
Yeah, in fairness to her, she's getting on a bit as well. She's had quite a long career, so she might be getting a little bit slower. But at the same time, what she has done for racing, along with Rachel Blackmore, I think that access, you actually couldn't put a price on it. I'll actually ask you, lads, and we're going to wrap up, just slightly running out of time. So we're going to maybe put it all together here in the sense of Gaelic Warriors entered in both the handicap hurdle, the Stina Lindsay Charity Liffey handicap hurdle, in which Akira Len is also represented potentially for Willie Mullins. But he's also entered to take on Facile Vega in the Tattersalls Ireland Novice Hurdle. I presume we all think Facile Vega will win. If I could kind of ask you generally, anything else on the card, and if Constitution Hill is the best thing ever, will Facile Vega be the next best thing ever?
Well, I'll say that I'm not sure about Facile Vega, really. I think he'd want to be putting in maybe a slightly sharper performance than he did at Christmas time, but I think he will, and I think he'll win. I don't see anything that will beat him in that race. I don't think Gaelic Warrior will run in either race, to be honest. And I think the bet in the handicap hurdle is also Mano Work. He's 14 to 1. I think one of these big races will fall his way at some stage for Paul Fahey. He's an improving horse, 4th behind the Emmett Mullins nag in the big Ferry House handicap hurdle, that Merlin Giant who looked like he had 2 stone in hand. So there was no discredit in that performance, and I think he'd be the each-way bet of the whole Sunday card.
Yeah, long before the woke days of now, Dukey, Del Boy and Rodney are up at the bar, and Del kind of chats to these apparently 2 nice women, and Rodney goes, "Are they a couple of ravers?" And Del goes, "They're a couple of geezers," right? So they ended up leaving, and there was a Freudian slip there from ABW where he called Facile Vega a she, because you can't think of Facile Vega without thinking of Quavega.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing that he came out of Quavega, because she was famously a pony, and he's not far off 17 hands, and he's a horse of real substance as well. He's a very impressive specimen. But if you're going to compare him to Constitution Hill, no horse should be compared to Constitution Hill, in my opinion. Yes. But the big deal with Facile Vega is temperament. This started to manifest itself in the Punchestown bumper last year, where he got very edgy before the race. He had 2 handlers in the parade ring in Leopardstown the last day. Now, in fairness, he settled pretty well in the race, but just with a view, there's going to be a big crowd there again on Sunday, just with a view to the supreme. Just keep an eye on him in the preliminaries because this horse could boil over. I mean, the thing about Constitution Hill is, I think why you can't compare horses to him is because he's the complete package. He basically, if there was a human equivalent to Constitution Hill, it'd be someone, a kindergarten teacher by day and a crime fighter by night. You could leave him with the kids all day, put him in the race. He's like a lamb in the race, and then he's just a stone cold killer when you ask him to go and win his race. Whereas Facile Vega, now he didn't lick it off a stone. He's by walking the park, so there's a bit of manja in him.
Exactly.
Just keep an eye on him. His temperament is a concern for me.
Briefly, have you anything else the rest of the card?
No.
That was pretty brief. Last word to you, Josh. And in fairness, I think we've had a compelling show here. Lots of different views. The Facile Vega view is fascinating, I think, because there is that little bit of a Monjou in him.
Yeah, I think he's just got too much. I think he'll go unbeaten this season. I'm not sure he's Constitution Hill, but I'd love to see it next year if they fancy keeping over hurdles. Although he is a big horse, so I'd imagine chasing will be on the cards. I wouldn't be so worried. I think he's been exceptional to date. I think Willie made a statement at the start of the season, said that he's going to be a slow burner. He's going to improve with every run. And I would expect a season best here. The one horse that I like on the card is in the 2 mile handicap hurdle. The race last year was won by Call Me Lyrie and a Gordon Elliott young handicapper with form figures of 0-0-0. And he's got one in here at the Tide Turns, who was a smart juvenile, ran in the spring juvenile behind Vauban last year. He's off 131. I wonder if he's in this, and this has been a plan for a while.
Forget about Gavin and Stacey. What about Josh Stacey, Duke? He's put up these two absolute rags on form, and both trained by Gordon Elliott, if not 3.
Well, I think the lads did a sterling job because the problem with me coming on here is I don't really fancy anything particularly strongly over the weekend. I'll have a few bets, but very few. I thought it was a tricky card. 2 tricky cards, should I say.
Thanks to Will Haler, who obviously wasn't told by Dukey when he set up this podcast that I don't actually fancy anything over the weekend. I will take the Queen Sterling, or whatever the currency is nowadays, Kings actually. And sorry, I've missed a few months there. And thanks to Dukey for coming on, but thanks to Will Haler, thanks to Andrew and Josh. I hope you had a great time. It's unbelievable racing. I can't wait for it. Do remember to gamble responsibly, and I say that from the bottom of my heart. You can get carried away on these weekends, particularly with such short price favourites, and they're probably not all going to win. Maybe they will. Do gamble responsibly. Check out Racing TV over the weekend. All races live, and enjoy.
You are listening to On The Wire, Racing TV's Irish racing podcast.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.